Hey everybody, it is Leo here. I'm back with another Alexnader Raid boss fight guide. This time it's floor 3, the Arm of the Father. Since my first two videos did relatively well, I figured I'd bring out this guide. Now this fight does have a bit more complicated mechanics than floor 2, which was just, a big mass group of enemies. This boss is actually a carbon copy of the Liquid Flame boss in Final Fantasy V, and he has a human form, a hand form, and a tornado form, all of which we will cycle through in that order twice before going into the final phase, which will just end it out. So I'm going to cover the mechanics of each form as we get there, and hopefully be able to provide a conclusive or all-inclusive guide for tanks, DPS, and healers. Now, this first phase, the human form, is pretty straightforward. He has a frontal cleave that hits pretty hard, so like your most bosses and enemies in this game, you're going to want to stay away from the front of him. He also has a move that I believe is called Protean Blast or something of that nature, and that's just targets 4 random people with a ground AoE, very simple to dodge. The last thing is a move I believe is pronounced Sluice or Sluice. That targets 4 random people with a blue indicator over their head. Now, where those indicators disappear, it'll erupt with water, immediately damaging them, but then it will also leave 4 AoE rings that will blow up again. So those people who are marked will get hit, so that means healers are going to have to focus them a little bit. It's not massive damage that's uncontrollable, but it's definitely something that you want to look out for, and don't stack together, otherwise you will accidentally kill each other with that splash damage. Literal splash damage. Anyway, the phase push, I don't know if it's time-based or if it's percentage-based. It always seems to happen around 85% in my groups. So I believe it could be a percent thing, but I'm not sure. I haven't played with it enough yet to find out. Anyway, he'll push to the hand here momentarily. Now the hand does continue on with the frontal cleaves. However, this time, the frontal cleaves are shared between targets. So you want your off tank to get in front, just like ours did here in the video, to help share that damage. Now, right after the first cleave, which is coming up right here, he's going to do a move called Wash Away, which you want everybody to be stacked pretty much dead center because it's a pretty large knockback, and you don't want to get knocked out into that lightning because it gives you paralysis and a thunder resistance down, and I think a thunder dot, if I'm not mistaken. It's a bunch of nasty status effects. Most likely want to avoid it. He only does the move once right after the first cleave in the transition to the hand form, so it's pretty easy to avoid if you know it's coming. Right now, the hands just split, and that is the only other mechanic in this. Now, the off tank is going to want to grab the other hand, and really, they just have to face it away from the main tank and the rest of the party. They don't really have to pull it away, although your melee DPS will probably thank you for the positionals on the rear side of the monster. Now, the reason that you can't have one tank hold them all for any real length of time is each cleave swipe thing gives you a stack of blunt resistance down, and they hit with blunt damage, as you might suspect. So you don't want to be taking 2 for every swipe, otherwise you'll get face rolled. Now we're moving into the tornado phase, and this phase has the most mechanics to it. First off, adds will continuously spawn throughout this phase, and they slowly try to move towards the outer edge. Now you can stun them, you can use miasma or lethargy or anything to slow their movement down, so utilize those abilities to the best of your ability, because if they get to the outer ring, they explode, hitting everybody with vulnerability up and thunder resistance down, I believe it is. And that'll come into effect later. Now, the second major mechanic in this fight are the Polarity Tethers. So 2 people will get targeted with a tether, kind of like Turn 11's tethers in terms of animation, like I have it right here, and I have a negative mark. Now, if the person that you're tethered to has the same polarity as you, that means you've both got a plus sign or you've both got a minus sign, you want to get together, because like a magnet, you'll get pushed apart when the tether disappears. If you have opposite polarities, one's plus, one's minus, like we just had, you want to separate, because when the tether disappears, it'll pull you together, just like 2 magnets of opposite polarities do in real life. The last mechanic of this phase, I did just do while I was talking there, is a single tether from the tornado to a random player. Now, if you run through that tether, you take it yourself, and it can continuously be passed along. However, after a few short seconds, the tether disappears and the targeted person blows up with a massive AoE of damage, so a tank needs to run through that and drag it to an outer edge and make sure nobody crosses through it, so they just kind of blow up separately. I Sword Oath tank that fight, and it hits for about 9 to 10k in Sword Oath gear with all I-180 armor. So if you're tanking, just be aware of that. Healers, be present-minded to the fact that's going to be some spike healing opportunities. Now we're back to human form. As I said, you will rotate through these forms twice. So the mechanics don't really change, so there's no need to cover them. But the one thing I want to point out right now is by this point in the fight, if you've been managing cooldowns and healing appropriately, this is almost your breather phase again to kind of recover from any quick off cooldown abilities or anything you used on the tornado phase. So this is a good balancing out point. The other thing I've noticed in my experience with this fight is the forms all seem to share HP. The human form, obviously, when it turns into the hand form, I'll have to see here in the video. I think it keeps the same percentage, but then when they split, they share their HP pool and come back together as the tornado with the combined HP once again. So it's a theory I've wanted to try, and if any of you watching have tried this yet and can tell me the results, I'd be very thankful down in the comment section. Once the second hand splits like it's about to do here, you could potentially caster 2 or limit break the thing. And in theory, if you get him down to 13% each or so, you'll have a final form that starts at 25-26% rather than the mid-30s like it usually is. And if that's the case, it might be more viable than just waiting for an LB3, although healer LB3 is nice in that final phase, obviously, to recover in case something goes wrong. So we haven't tried it yet. If anybody else has, like I said, let me know what your results were and if it seemed to help. As of right now, we're just doing the whole split the hands, avoid getting each other swiped mechanic, and I believe we push it through at about 18% on each hand, which is normal for the groups that I've been with as far as DPS goes. So if you're under 20%, you're probably on the right track. Now they're going to fuse here again, go back to the tornado, of course, since that's the rotation. The only thing I've noticed about the second tornado, and this could just be me imagining it because of the stress of the fight, is I feel like more ads spawn, but again, I don't really know. I think it might just be a flat 15 ads altogether, if I counted correctly here in my time in this fight. But again, I switched to Sword Oath as a paladin. Warrior can use Deliverance and anything, just get that. Now see, the Tether just went out there to the off tank. He got it, and I believe, if I remember the video footage correctly, this next one I'll grab and you'll see it in action and a little bit more up front. Oh no, I do grab it. I remember why. You'll see in a minute. Anyway, we've got our negative tethers here, so we got to separate out, and you'll see as soon as it disappears, we're going to yank together. And the idea here is if you're too close together, you're going to get blown away. Now, I've got the tether, and I'm not topped off, as you can see. I have an max HP down debuff, and that just blows me away for that 9,000 damage that it does in Sword Oath. So be wary of that, tanks. Don't let your healers down here and screw them over. And a big thing for paladins in this fight especially is you're using shield bash to stun these things. I sometimes will just run around in a circle bashing everything, so you let the 6-second stun kind of settle in and hope that everybody else can finish him off. So now we've officially entered into the final phase. The final phase pretty much encompasses all of the mechanics of the fight so far into one, with the exception that this move Cascade is added in, which is a pretty massive AoE damage that you want to try and shield with Sucker Adloquiums or Sacred Soils, anything like that that you can do for mitigation. And that's where those stacks for each time you let an ad get to the ring in the tornado phases can screw you, because the vulnerability ups and the resistance downs really make that hurt a lot. Paladins, you can pop Divine Veil, and that helps immensely. So I would recommend doing that. The only mechanic that is not present in this phase that was for the earlier parts of the fight is the single tether that the tornado did. As you just saw, the Polarity Tethers are still in place here. You still have to deal with Sluis from the normal human forms. You still have to deal with the hard swipes, and then he also does that like AoE bash move where he just punches the ground really hard. That move reminds me a bit of Titan in that I think, if I'm correct here, he adds 1 AoE hit each time you let him do it, so it's almost like a soft enrage after a while. The last thing that I just touched about 10 seconds ago in the video was those like 3 swirling vortices of water there give you dropsy when you're standing in them. So it's just kind of like taking up some of the arena and not using it as viable space anymore. It's not anything that will insta-kill you, but you don't want to be hanging out in it for too long. See, so now here comes another cascade, and they start to really wear you down over time, as you can imagine. The only other mechanic in this part of the fight that I want to point out now for tanks is you do get blunt resistance down stacks from him, and most tanks like to switch at 4. Now, at this point in time, the off tank has that, and I decided it's close enough to the end that I'll just stay in Shield Oath and help DPS it down. But most groups will say a 4-stack switch is appropriate, just because his cleaves do start to hurt pretty bad. And you can see I'm still at 5. They last quite a while, so you almost have to, you might even have to push to 5 to get a good even exchange on it. But as you can see in this group, even a warrior who doesn't really have all the damage mitigation a paladin has is handling it fine with 7 stacks. I think he's about to have 6 or 7. And it's not critical. So in summary, human form, you've got Sluice that targets 4 people. You got to spread out and avoid those. Dodge the ground AoEs, don't get cleaved by being in front of the boss. You've got the hand form that has the shared frontal cleave damage, and when they split, they just need to be facing away from the party and each other. And then the tornado form, you've got the adds that need to be killed before they hit the outer ring. You've got the single tether that a tank needs to be grabbing off of people and running to the outer edge away from everybody. And you've got the polarity tethers, where same polarity goes together, reverse polarity separates. And that is all the mechanics of the fight. It's just keep up with those heals, make sure your tanks are coordinated with each other. And other than that, it's fairly straightforward. Out of all of them, I personally feel it's the easiest one. I know I'm going to get a lot of people saying I'm an idiot for that, but that's just my opinion. In any case, folks, hopefully this video was as helpful for you as the others. I do want to thank you as always for your time in watching this, and please do not forget to comment and subscribe and leave your feedback below as always. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time for Floor 4.